Okay, I call to order the Lynchburg Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, February 26th, 2020. And the first order of business is the approval of our January 8th, 2020 minutes. Has everybody had a chance to read them? Any changes? Anything of note? We have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes as submitted.
All right.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
I'll abstain. I was
Yeah,
absent.
you okay. Next order of business is the following public hearing item. It's a consideration of adopting the Forest Brook Road corridor study as part of the city's comprehensive plan for 2013 through 2030. The purpose of the study is to provide the city of Lynchburg with a detailed planning level assessment of the options for future needs of Forest Brook Road that will enhance safety while accommodating future capacity of the roadway. The plan provides the following recommendations: trimming and maintenance of vegetation, upgrading guardrails, installation of curb and gutter and sidewalk, improve intersection radius at Forest Brook Road and Lakeside Drive, improve the horizontal curvature of the roadway, and ensure adequate site distances. So if one of you want to...
Members of Planning Commission, this study was prepared by Clark's Nexon in partnership with the City of Lynchburg and the Central Virginia Metropolitan Planning Organization. Really looks at the existing traffic conditions on Forest Brook Road and considers what improvements may be needed for future traffic volumes. It also addresses existing and desired conditions for pedestrians and bicyclists, and obviously addresses safety concerns. Mr. Scott Smith, the Planning Director for the Planning District Commission, is with us today, and he's going to be giving you the presentation.
Great.
Thank you all very much. I have a relatively brief presentation that I'm happy to elaborate on or de-elaborate on, depending on your questions that you might have. A couple of years ago, the City of Lynchburg Engineering Division asked us to undertake this study as we were able to get it into our work program. They had been looking at Forest Brook Road for some time and wanted to kind of develop a plan for how to make some improvements over short and long term. Just as a reminder, Forest Brook Road basically runs north-south. It connects Lakeside Drive down here. The News and Advance office is here. It connects Lakeside Drive with Old Forest Road, the Walmart, Bojangles, Biscuitville, and all are up here. The corridor is a little over a mile long. There are a number of different land uses along the corridor. Obviously, a lot of retail on the north end. We have industrial and office space at Framatome, available industrial space there. Also industrial at Finley Corporation and Cavalier Steel. Spread throughout are apartment units in this area, townhouses in this area, and townhouses there. We have a very large trailer park on the southern end, and then more retail and office and medical use down at the southern end as well. Going into this, we had some assumptions. We thought it was let me first say that this road has been there for a very long time. It's over 150 years old, probably much longer than that. It was built as a country road and is now serving as a connector between two of Lynchburg's primary roadways. We also have a railroad crossing here. This line is not in heavy use, but we do still have the grade crossing. So we had some assumptions. Those assumptions were that because it's such a curvy road, people drive slowly on the road. Because it's such a curvy road, that people don't walk on the road. And those assumptions were blown out of the water when we did our study. This is really washed out. But just to give you an idea of the crashes, the 2 years that we captured, 2016 to 2018, I'll kind of identify these locations for you. We had 2 crashes up towards the Walmart. Just so you know, the blue is property damage and the green is injury, personal injury. And then we had 1 down towards the mobile home park, where that curve is, the really sharp curve near Lynchburg Collision. And then the other 4 were on either side of the railroad crossing. not really that many crashes, not an abnormal number of crashes. So in order to get some better data about the conditions that drivers were experiencing, we held a public meeting last May because what we were interested in finding out was what are the near misses, the things that never show up on the police reports, crashes that almost happened but didn't. We also looked at traffic volume. The traffic, and I won't go into the turning movements and things, they're in your report, but the traffic volumes are relatively low, about 5,000 per day. It depends on which end of the road you're on. It varies a little bit, but about 5,000 per day. Compared to some other roads in Lynchburg, that's fairly low. We do not anticipate looking out on the long term to 2040, so looking out 20 years, we do not anticipate the traffic volumes increasing significantly at all on Forest Brook Road, unless there is major development that occurs that we don't have on our radar. But based on what's there now, we don't anticipate volume increasing. So we had a public meeting, May 29th of last year. Lynchburg Collision was very nice to let us use one of their repair or their wash bay, which was a little not untraditional for us, but it worked really well because folks could walk to the meeting from their houses, and it was along the corridor. We did a mailing to residents, businesses, property owners. We had a couple of newspaper and television stories. We had about 30 stakeholders attend. For that size neighborhood, that was probably about right. We always hope for more, but 30 was a good number, especially because the people who came were very engaged and interested in the project, and they had a lot of good information for us. So overwhelmingly, what we heard from residents was that they had trouble walking along Forest Brook Road. There's a great deal of pedestrian traffic that occurs between the mobile home park on the southern end and the Walmart on the northern end. And as we started looking at the corridor, we found pedestrians almost every time we were out there. Sometimes pushing baby strollers, sometimes carrying multiple bags of groceries, but many more pedestrians than we expected. The other thing we found is that drivers don't obey the speed limit. In your report, it shows that the observed speed versus posted speed was maybe 10 miles an hour higher. I think the speed limit there is 30. People were doing 37 to 41 or something like that as an average. So even though the roadway is curvy, narrow, has sharp drop-offs, not a lot of shoulder, folks are using it as a cut-through, and they're trying to get through Forest Brook as quickly as they can. Another thing that we learned from residents that we would not have seen in our computer models is that there are a number of intersections along Forest Brook Road where drivers have poor sight distance, sight lines in order to see who's coming, oncoming when they turn left or right out of their driveway or street. And then we heard from the business community that it's very difficult for trucks to maneuver. We have, as you saw, we have two industrial facilities in the middle of the corridor, Finley and Cavalier Steel. Their trucks have difficulty maintaining their lane, so we'll talk about proposed solution for that in a minute. So we did the public meeting, we got folks' input, and then the engineers went to work taking that information with the data that they had collected to come up with some recommendations. We have kind of two batches of recommendations, short-term and long-term. The short-term are relatively simple. One is simply trimming and continuing to trim overgrown vegetation. There are a number of, as I said before, there are a number of locations where the trees and bushes are just growing out into or almost into the roadway, and it just makes it hard to see signage and cars that are coming on. Another short-term recommendation would be to upgrade the guardrail throughout the corridor, but particularly in the area of the railroad crossing and the creek below the railroad crossing, and to make sure that any signage improvements follow the guidelines which they're supposed to follow. Any questions about those before I move on to the long term?
Those are relatively easy to accomplish, right, Scott?
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. So the long term, and I apologize that this is so small. So there are, and I'll show you the two proposed sections. A cross section of the roadway is basically if if you cut the roadway and looked at it from the end, what it would look like, the curb and gutter, the sidewalk, and things like that. And there are two different cross sections that are proposed. One of them is preferred. Alternative number 2 is preferred. And what alternative number 2 would do is it would install pedestrian accommodations, AKA sidewalks, on one side of the road. It would install underground stormwater facilities and to remove some of the ditches that are problematic with erosion. And then to get some of the objects out of the clear zone, there are some utility poles and other things that are in this area we call the clear zone, which is basically the area in which if a car leaves the roadway, the driver needs that space to correct to get back on the roadway. If there's an object in the clear zone, like a telephone pole, they're not going to be able to correct before they hit the pole. So it's always optimal to have things outside of that clear zone if possible. Intersection improvements, as Tom mentioned, improving the intersection radius, the curve at Lakeside and Forest Brook. Also lengthening the left turn lane storage capacity, so the length of the left turn lane along Forest Brook as it reaches both Old Forest and Lakeside Drive. Occasionally, vehicles will stack up in the turn lane and will block other vehicles behind them from being able to make the movements that they want to. So you'll have some empty, unused space in the intersection. Also, upgrade the pedestrian accommodations at the intersections to meet ADA requirements. Some of them do meet ADA. Some of the work was done recently, and some of the work needs to be upgraded when other work is done. Another major recommendation for that would be to improve the horizontal curvature. In other words, to not straighten that curve near the mobile home park, but to bring it into modern engineering specifications. So if you've ever driven that curve, you realize that you have to jerk your steering wheel a couple of times to keep going because it's not a smooth curve and it's very sharp. So I'll show you a picture of what is recommended, but it would not be to straighten the curve. We're very concerned about the speeds that people are driving, the people are driving on that road right now. We're very concerned that if we straighten that curve, it would make it even worse because it would put them on a straight shot down into the creek valley where trees are overhanging. It's dark, and they're just going to go faster. Also, to make sure that there's good sight distance for the entrances, an entrance south of Cavalier Steel. There are some driveway entrances down there that have trouble seeing. Now, any of this could change if land use changes. So, there is vacant land on either side of Forest Brook Road. Some of it is buildable, some of it maybe not so much, but there is vacant land that has been subdivided and for a number of years on Forest Brook. So we want to keep an eye on that as development might occur. So I'll show you these drawings here. So alternative 1, which is not the one that we are recommending, but alternative 1 would basically keep the traditional ditch layout. There would be no curb and gutter, but there would be a sidewalk, in this case on the east side of Forest Brook Road. Alternative 2, which is the one we're recommending, because it will help deal with stormwater issues that are on that road as well, has curb and gutter on each side and also the sidewalk. And again, this is just kind of showing how it would run along there.
Scott?
Yes.
I was just a little surprised that alternative 2 with curb and gutter is preferred. I thought if I ran off the road a little bit, that curb would kick me back and maybe send me over into the other lane or something, as opposed to running off the road a little bit and having room to correct on my own.
The hope would be that if the geometry of the road was corrected somewhat and the surface was widened slightly, that drivers wouldn't be running off the road anymore, that they would be able to maintain their lane better.
And does a curb maybe tend to slow traffic down a little bit if you know there's something over there to...
There are different studies that have shown different things, but my feeling is that the curb and gutter shows a driver that they're in an urbanized area and that they should be slowing down. And it also, again, it provides that edge for a driver to see, and it's usually more effective than a stripe. It also makes pedestrians more comfortable because the pedestrians know that there's a 6-inch or so drop between them and the motorist. And so usually pedestrians feel better on a sidewalk that's separated by a curb and gutter and a utility strip, which is what's recommended here. We do think we have 40-foot right-of-way along most of that roadway, so this would fit in there.
The other thing too is that given the grade back there, and I think the east side, if I'm remembering the road right, is a little lower anyhow. Without that curb and gutter, your sidewalk would be underwater most of the time.
Yeah,
And the
we-
erosion problems would not be ameliorated that much.
And there are issues with ponding as it is on some parts of the road. We had a number of residents show us where the ponding occurs. Yes.
Which side of the road is the sidewalk proposed? Is it the Walmart side or the opposite side?
Generally speaking, the Walmart side. In fact, I think all the Walmart side.
Okay.
I don't think we proposed a crossing anywhere. And so we already have sidewalk on the north end, and this would tie into it.
So that would take people from the trailer park to Walmart without having to cross the road at all.
Right. So just to show you that proposed curve realignment, and this is not oriented north-south, I apologize, I wanted to make the picture as big as I could, so I turned it on its side. But again, we're not talking about taking out buildings and straightening out the curve. This is the existing curve. You see the GIS property line right there. This is just bringing that curve into a consistent radius that drivers can handle better. We think that will solve the problem without speeding drivers up even more. It would require some acquisition of property, which council would need to, undertake if they wanted to do this.
Given the length of the trucks coming through there, you don't have much choice. I mean, I would think Cavalier alone would have, with the beams and stuff they're bringing in, would be enough that they'd need to have that.
We heard from either Findlay, I can't remember if it was the folks from Findlay or from Cavalier, that their drivers have trouble maintaining their lane, going the speed they're supposed to, going slower than they're supposed to. And then with drivers oncoming who are not maintaining their lanes, it causes problems.
Same thing.
Right.
They go through there a lot.
Right. Now, interestingly, when we were doing the counts, we did a 48-hour count. We only had about 4% of the traffic being truck traffic, but they're big vehicles and they count for more in some ways than regular cars. So those are the proposed. I did make a larger version of this. So this gives a nice kind of comparison between the two alternatives, just to show you utility impacts, right-of-way impacts, wetland, drainage design, bicycle accommodations, proposed or possible construction duration. So you see the alternative 2, the recommended alternative, has fewer impacts on certain things. We think it has a bigger impact on safety. And it would be actually a little bit shorter construction time. But I agree, and the engineer tried to walk me through that, and it made a lot of sense to him. And I can, if that's a question, I can go back and get it again. But that's what they felt.
Was there any look at changing the what I call the back entrance to Walmart? One of the wrecks, one of the crashes that you showed was up around Walmart. I'm assuming that it has to do with getting out of, I guess, what comes out on the side. Just if it were just, in other words, if you could just come in from the Lakeside side, so that's a right turn, and then maybe have them coming out as a right turn only, rather than being able to come in, because that's a weird situation. I wasn't sure if that had to do with where the crashes were exactly, or
it could. I'd have to drill down into each crash and look at what it.
But given the turn lane, you made a comment about how long that turn lane that would be now turning left on Old Forest. It can string back there pretty far, and people coming in and out of there, it doesn't zipper together very well.
Okay.
Well, the other thing is where Biscuitville is located,
Yeah.
main entrance is on Forest Brook. It's not conducive for people going down
Yeah.
Old Forest Road to get in there, so you got people trying to zip into Biscuitville against all the other traffic.
Since we're having a public hearing.
Sure.
And I don't know if that's kind of wraps up your
It does,
presentation, but
yes.
I'd like to hear from people who might be in support or in opposition to this. So if you can be prepared to come back up when we're done, and I'm sure we'll have more questions. Is there anybody who wants to speak in favor of this plan?
Some of it I'm in favor of, some of it I'm not in favor of.
Would you like to come up and speak? And if you'd please sign your name, state your name, and then tell us what you were thinking.
My name's Ryan Wheeler. I'm with Bowling Steel, aka Cavalier Steel. Mark Bowling is on vacation, asked me to come and speak if I agreed or disagreed with any of the study. We definitely agree with the increase in turn radius at the intersection of Forest Brook and Lakeside, and also turning the S-curve into one round curve. We need that definitely for our trailers are 60 foot, add the cab, that's 72 feet, et cetera. One thing I don't agree with about the study, it said that the traffic flow at the intersection of Lakeside and Forest Brook is okay. If anyone's stuck on Forest Brook, and turn left on the Lakeside, you can follow it all the way down the Mormon Drive during the summer. It's backed up both ways on Forest Brook, past the S-curve down the hill during the summer. So, and also the light at Forest Brook, sorry, I hate public speaking, so I get a little nervous. Also, the light at Forest Brook and Lakeside is extremely short coming off of Forest Brook. I think I was there last night, and it only lets 4 cars take a left, and then it turns red again. It's really short, so it just backs up, and it's awful, period. I'm not too sure if alternative 1 roadway is acceptable for our industrial trailers or Finley's trucks because of the gutter. I mean, we even get some oversized trailers coming through there occasionally. So that extra shoulder would be great, especially even in a curve. It has room for the trailers to move and also for traffic coming the other way, so people have room to move if something's wrong. That gutter, like she said, someone could hit it, cause a wreck, boom, you're done.
So the alternative 1, you do like that? Alternative 1?
Yeah,
one with
alternative.
the wider.
Yeah, alternative 1 is probably better for industrial use because that extra shoulder for our trailers and Finley's industrial trucks. It did say, when I was reading through it on page 23 of the study, it said that that our entrance and Finley's entrance is too narrow. The turn radiuses need to be increased. But in the long-term recommendations, it does, or even in the short term, it doesn't mention it at all. So they redesigned the culvert there at our entrances a few years back, and they narrowed our entranceway. So, and we were told just to live with it, we're gonna have to accept it as is. But now you have a study saying that our entrance needs to be bigger for our trailers, et cetera. But now it's not recommended. That just doesn't make sense to me. If it says that's a problem, but then there's no solution in the study. I think, and like you said, vegetation, there's trees blocking both our views trying to get in and out. You can't see traffic because trees are coming. Let me see, do not record. I think that's it for when I read through the study.
Great, thanks. If you could put your name down that paper, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, anybody else would like to speak in favor of this plan? Okay, how about opposition? Is there anybody opposed? Want to get it? We heard favor and opposed here, so we took note of that. If you would please state your name and sign your name there.
My name's Adam Ferris. I'm with Finley Corporation. We are, there's some that are okay, but for the most part, we have land right there in the curve, the S-curve right there on the left. So when you come around that would take away some of that land. It's only an acre there that we own. But we also want to develop that eventually, so the less land we have, the less we can do with. If you have to go to the right, it's not as much there, it's already established, but in the left, it's just a narrow lot that is going to eat up time or space for us. So that's one reason I don't want to see that take over there. As far as the pooling I heard earlier, I don't ever see anywhere that the water is standing in the road. There is one problem that it does need to be crowned a little bit better. We do have water that goes across the road, but it's not ever standing in the road. So that is one issue we see. The sidewalk, yeah, there's people on the road. It needs to be fixed on that part. I can agree with that, but also I don't mind any concrete going down either. So,
Conflict.
but yeah, so that is what I see. That's the only things I do. I mean, my biggest thing is we're here is because of that curve and the land there. Other than that, like I said, the sidewalks, I'm surprised no one's gotten killed on that hill trying to come up that, walking in the road. It's nowhere to go on either side. So that's the only I can see that really needs to be fixed. But
Would you mind using that pointer and showing us what curve, just so everybody's on the same page with where you're talking about?
right
So you'll
there
own
in the
some
sharp
land up
curve
there as
on the
well?
left,
Okay.
there's that little house
Yeah.
where the bushes are overgrown. We are just past there on the left. There's an entryway that Revis owns. There's like a little entrance there,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're right before the entrance on the left.
Great. Okay, I want to make sure we didn't get that confused with your, with
We
where you're-
own,
The lot that you, Scott, you were talking
Yeah.
about. the
We own
same
this.
thing was his lot.
yeah, we own this right here.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Just out of curiosity, I'm not trying to be nosy
Yeah.
about your business, but what are your plans as far as development of it is concerned?
We're in the air right now debating what we want to do with it. It's going to probably be something, I mean, it's a lot, I believe it's light industrial, so it's going to be something along that terms. Whether it be some kind of storage area or something like that along that route. I don't know what we're going to put there. But land's hard to get, and I don't want to take away from that because it's already, like I said, it's already narrow, so it's hard to do something with already. But yeah, so that's what we had to say.
Thank you. You got your
All right.
name down.
Yep.
Anybody else want to speak in opposition? If there's any other comments before Scott comes back up and addresses these comments here. Scott, if you want to come back up, we heard about the interest in that alternative one and also the issue of land and support for sidewalks, which is good. Do you have any?
Access issue in the
Yeah,
driveway.
yeah,
The entrance access.
for
Right.
both Cavalier and Finley, that.
So, first I'll speak about the intersection of Lakeside and Forest Brook. It is I think that the engineers were, when they said that it operated acceptably, I think that they meant that it operated acceptably in the terms of Forest Brook Road. We did not actually charge them with analyzing the Lakeside Forest Brook intersection or the Old Forest Road Forest Brook intersection. For Old Forest Road and Forest Brook Road, that had just been reworked relatively recently, so we felt that was doing okay. My understanding is for the Lakeside intersection that there's a plan for significant work on Lakeside that will be addressing that situation down there. So we didn't have them look at that. I think what they were looking at is how those two intersections fed Forest Brook and what level of service it gave Forest Brook. So yes, to say that multiple light intersection down there operates smoothly at all times of day is not correct. And I can make sure that we adjust the text to make that more clear. Certainly, the land, the curve, that would be an issue. I mean, realigning that curve can't be done without acquiring some private property. And that would just be something that city council would have to decide if they wanted to do. I mean, the geometry of it doesn't really, you're not really able to go further that way. That makes the curve worse. I mean, this is the side that would have to be shaved off. But that's a legitimate concern from the property owners. Yes.
In the purchase, but that would have to be agreed upon by the owner.
Absolutely.
Right, I mean, they can't take it.
The city would use whatever process they normally use for that. I can't speak to the details of it, but.
I assume if it wasn't something voluntarily worked out, that they would go through the condemnation process.
So they could go through that.
I believe, I'm not an expert on that area of law, but yeah, I think so. Tom, do you know?
We could, we would try very hard not to.
Yeah.
It looks like you would be taking more of the length of the property than the width. As he said, it was already a very narrow piece of property, and I don't know how long it goes down beyond the picture, but you'd be taking more off of the top of it than
It's
the
basically a
side.
crescent here. And I asked the engineers to look at any options for staying within the existing city right-of-way, and they just couldn't make the math work out. The right-of-way is fairly tight in there. But that's a legitimate concern, as are all of them, actually. The question about the driveway entrance, it may have been an oversight. I'll go back and make sure, but I think the reason why it wasn't put in the recommendations, in the actual recommendations to the city, is because I'm not sure that reworking the driveway entrance would be the city's responsibility, or it would be a cooperation thing. And I think that the recommendations here were just on the public end of things. I don't know, because I'm not familiar with the city's driveway entrance policy. I'm not sure how much work they do on driveway entrances versus what the property owner does. So I'm not really able to speak to that.
It might be useful for the curvature question to calculate how much land it would actually be needed.
Taking into account that we did not conduct a survey, we can do an estimate based
Yes.
on, yeah.
Because they own an acre, essentially, right there.
Well, since we don't have any groups, I think we'll close the public hearing. If there are more questions, I think, well, one of the ones I wanted to ask, and I don't know how much of this involves looking at costs, but a little disappointed that there isn't any kind of, that the preferred option has no bike accommodation. I think that's something that is good. I know that as a city, we've been trying to move more towards that in halting steps. But I do like that first iteration of it because of that, because the option to be able to have a bike on an outside shoulder.
Right, and that's what it would be.
Yeah.
It's not an official bike lane, it's just a paved
Right.
shoulder that would be available for a bicycle if needed. There would be I think one of the things that makes alternative one take longer is that there's a fair amount of grading that would have to be done on the stretch from this curve down to the creek. Part of the bank would have to be pulled off, and then soil would have to be put in on the other side to make because if you notice, this requires 46 feet of right-of-way, whereas the curb and gutter requires 39. So there's a lot more earth moving. But certainly, that would be a little bit of a refuge for a cyclist, and that's
Yeah.
good input.
Not a lot of space down over that creek. That one side is pretty.
Right.
Well, that's kind of my issue too, and I thought about that a lot on the walking. First of all, with the speed, as you've said on a number of occasions, you want to make it straighter so that people will drive faster. So I'm happy with that section, but the problem that you end up with is you end up with a pretty mean piece of road, and having ridden pretty extensively through Lynchburg, I can tell you the worst situation is when there's no place to go. And whether you have a curb or not, there's no place to go. And I don't know how to say this nicely, but personally, I like to make room for big trucks coming down the road. I'm amazed at what they can do with trucks. I'm amazed every day, but I always like to watch from a distance on that. And I can't imagine being on a bicycle, I can't imagine walking, quite frankly, but being on a bicycle. So the point of all this is to say, where's the balance point? This just might be one of those roads where bicycles just aren't going to be, just because of the grade, they just don't go there. And I don't know where the balance point is, but There are a lot of places there, man. There are a lot of places that I used to ride all the time, and I wouldn't think of riding now for that reason. And they're just not a good idea.
Yeah, and I think that's why you don't see more in here. One is the cost and right-of-way issue, but another is just the safety and will people use it if we put it in. I mean, we always make a point of focusing on multimodal, bike, pedestrian, walking, bus, if there is bus service, when we do these studies. It just didn't work out on this one, in our opinion. And of course, this is just a plan. This isn't, these aren't construction documents. This isn't a directive for what's going to be done. These are ideas. And if council ever decided to do something with this in the future, you know, we'd have to see what was designed.
Is it illegal for bikes to run on the sidewalk?
In the city, I believe it is.
That's too bad. I mean, I thought it was, and I wish,
Well, we usually, what do? We make it like a
can you make it a,
10-foot multi-purpose
yeah,
trail is what
Right.
we do.
but you don't have, you probably don't have 10 feet to make a wide enough.
There's not enough dirt for it. We looked at that. I mean, you can do anything with money, but in this case, we didn't feel that was worth presenting.
The other issue here too is you looked at land use, or excuse me, available land on this road. And I think that was good, and I think you've already heard that there may be some stuff, you know, rolling around that area. But the other piece is I was amazed at the traffic that came down Forest Brook off of, I guess I'm gonna forget the name of the road, but the one that goes by Covenant and all that. There's a lot of land out there, both from the standpoint of school growth and from the standpoint of residential growth. And I don't know where the traffic's coming from. I know that I use the road to cut across from that Nationwide area, going to the hospital and taking doctor's appointments and stuff. I cut through there a lot for that. And as that area grows up, I think this road has the opportunity to have a lot more pressure. And I think I'm just grappling with how we keep this from being an overused, in the sense of the road's not built for that kind of traffic, cut-through road. We've already got some good entrants in that particular category at this point, and we're at the point of making some of those decisions now. So I'm trying to figure out exactly how we keep that road small enough to where you sort of maintain, you know, that 4,900, 5,000, you know, trips a day, if that is indeed a sustainable level for that road. Because I think I was trying to think, Tom, the expressway extension that we keep talking about shouldn't have any impact on this particular situation at all, should it?
I don't think the improvements come up this far.
Well, I'm just thinking because I don't think any of this traffic would benefit from using those. That's kind of where I was trying to go to in my mind.
The majority of the traffic there is seeking the path of least resistance, coming from the forest area and over there, coming off Eagle Eye Mountain.
Right.
Coming bypass there, avoiding going to the big intersection.
Yeah.
Come down Old Forest Road and cutting over to get over to the hospital,
Well,
a direct line.
the
It really
other
doesn't matter,
situation,
you'll
though-
find the shorter path.
I think to that point, that's what scares me, because you heard Mr. Wheeler talk about the backup on Lakeside, but the backup on Timberlake is even worse. So I'm seeing more people do through the cut-through and then coming back up that little cut-through and then cutting across. I'm amazed at how many people are, you know, how much traffic is coming up that way. And, you know, again, this is all speculation. I mean, but it seems to me this would be a logical place for that traffic to land. And it's, you know, I don't know exactly what the steps are to prevent that kind of stuff from happening, but I want to make sure we've at least thought about it and raked our brains about what it might be.
Scott, one thing I would do in this plan, I like the idea of making that road, you know, for example, in the curve, in the S curve, plenty of times when I've had the distributor come through there or a steel truck come through, and I have to slow down and give them a little space. You might want to change in that alternative too. It has that bikes can be on the sidewalk, and I think, you know, just to be
that should be
accurate, to
there.
make sure it's like the alternative for the bikes is only in the road. so.
Yes.
Not a sidewalk. But I do like the idea of improving that.
So are we
Anybody have any
to
comments?
recommend approval of this to?
Yes,
to-
yeah, so we would have someone would make a motion, we would vote on, approving this and sending it to council, correct? Tom? Yeah.
And it still has options in it, so.
Mhm.
It's just the study
yeah.
that we're approving.
Well, I would.
So, just, I'm sorry, before you make
Go
your
ahead.
motion, so at that point, so given that comment that it is, a draft plan, it's not appropriate for us to add, it's not appropriate to put specific stuff in because we're not at a point of making those decisions. Is that correct, Tom?
Well, what type of things are you speaking of?
Well, none of the stuff that's been brought up would be, it's still all in the planning stage. So as an example, you wouldn't put something in like, we need to enlarge the entrances into I realize there are other issues, I'm just throwing something in.
Well, I think.
This is not appropriate at this time, is what I'm trying to say.
I think that would be looked at during the design phase. I think we could add a statement about looking at the width of those entrances to make sure that the turning radiuses are good. I don't know what your budget is, but I think it'd be a good idea to look at the truck turning radiuses coming around the new alignment. But going forward, I think if the preferred alternative is recommended as alternative 2, that's probably what we would go with. And I think if you look at alternative 1, there's much more right-of-way acquisition that would be needed to go through and do that. So that's probably one of the reasons they chose alternative 2. Also we were able to, it says we're able to deal with stormwater in a much better manner with alternative 2. So there were reasons behind them choosing alternative 2 over alternative 1. The straightening of the curb, that's something we'll have to work out during the design. Obviously that's a big part of this. I understand the owner wanting to develop their property, but, there's also a public safety thing that the city needs to look at, all right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have been doing this study. Yeah, I think if you move it forward at this point, alternative 2 is a preferred recommendation. If you have issues with that, you shouldn't send it forward right now.
One other question. I saw the width of the lanes, with the concrete curbs and the 4 feet. What is the current width? I'm sure it's in there somewhere of the lanes.
Need to find it, hang on.
I'm just wondering how much of that's probably still likely an improvement in width, even with the curbs. Assume there's an
It's not
improvement.
much, because there's not
Not a whole lot.
a lot of room.
Yeah, I think you're proposing 11.5-foot lanes, which we really wouldn't go below 11-foot lanes anywhere. We didn't even go.
It's very similar width.
And to Mr. Bowden's point about, not trying to make this encourage cut-through traffic, it's it's a double-edged sword, really, because if you widen it out to accommodate trucks better, then you're encouraging more cut-through. If you narrow it down to discourage cut-through, you're going to mess up the truck accommodation. Yeah.
Tom, procedurally, we recommend this to move forward with the recommendation being alternative 2. Will they come back at some point in the future when there's more detailed plans, or is this our only sort of pass at the apple?
If it passes council, it would go into the CIP at some point for funding. I'm not sure when that would be. I doubt you would ever see it again.
Well, I don't know if somebody else made the motion. I don't want to step on somebody that's already made a motion, but I recommend that we endorse alternative 2 of the plan as it is submitted.
Second.
All right, any other discussion? All right, we'll go ahead and vote on that then. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nope. All right, great. Well, thank you for bringing that to us, Scott, and give us an idea of what that might look like in the future. And I'd encourage those who spoke to make sure when this heard in council that you come with your concerns and mention those, because that's always a good place to, get that information out to them.
I think we all understand your concerns about your property, so we weren't trying to just roll over those, but procedurally, we can't solve those today. And procedurally, we need to move this forward. So as the chairman said, you still have an opportunity to get some tweaks out there. I mean, the safety issue to me is quite candidly more important than maybe your property issue, but you still have an opportunity to get some input and maybe some tweaks as to, so that you feel comfortable that your property rights aren't being run over.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Okay, do we have any other business, any new business or? Okay, well. You move to adjourn? All right, all in favor? Aye, we're out of here.